Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. One of the questions I get the most, no matter what's going on with the Cleveland Browns, especially in the later half of this year, is the hypothetical of if the Cleveland Browns were to fire Kevin Stefanski, well, who would I want to replace Kevin Stefanski as the Cleveland Browns head coach? And look, as we get closer and closer towards January, it seems more and more clear that the Browns might lean in the direction of firing Kevin Stefanski, which would be a big move for an organization. As much as Kevin's reputation has been clouded over the last couple of years, there is no denying that he's been the best coach the franchise has had since 1999, that he has seen the most individual playoff and winning success of any coach since 1999, and he is the most decorated coach this franchise has since 1999, regardless of how you feel about the Coach of the Year award. He's won 2 of them. The Browns have not had anybody who has had any close to getting any decorations as the Cleveland Browns coach. Kevin has 2 Coach of the Years. So it would be a big move to move off of Kevin. Now, all of that is not a justification to keep Kevin, right? Just because of all of those things being true, can't be the only reason that you're keeping Kevin. That being said, just because those circumstances exist, just because Kevin has those accomplishments, is not the justification to make him bulletproof that some people may want it to be, because they want to champion as much stability as possible. And I understand that urge to champion stability, because the Browns have not had stability for a very long time. And that has been a critical component in why the Cleveland Browns have been what the Cleveland Browns have been since 1999. It's not lost on me. But there are questions that need to be answered about the Cleveland Browns' future that I don't know if Kevin has proven if he can answer that question. So let's talk about the future of the Cleveland Browns head coach position. Let's talk about what you would want to see from the Cleveland Browns head coach position. When I have this conversation, I always make it clear that when it comes to talking about head coaches, I want to not fall into the trap of name recognition, right? Whenever you hear like 99% of these conversations about head coach hires, usually all it is people listing names that you can recognize and then ranking those names based on how recognizable, one, that name is, and 2, how much of a positive association you have with said recognizable name. This is how we end up in conversations that revolve around names like John Gruden and, oh, we should go after Nick Saban. I've heard Bill Belichick be floated out there, right? Mike McCarthy. It's how we end up talking about the same 5 people every head coach cycle. I don't feel like it actually attacks the root of the issue or is a really effective way of having the conversation. So me personally, when I'm talking about a coach hire of any sort, I avoid the name game, right? Because it's real easy to have a name floated to you for a couple of reasons, fall in love with that name, and then be hyper fixated on the Browns getting that name. Doesn't have to be a former head coach for this to happen, by the way, right? Like, I know I named a bunch of former head coaches, but I saw this same dynamic in play with the Cleveland Browns when they hired Hugh Jackson. See, what people forget, Hugh Jackson, huge commodity when he came out of Cincinnati, right? When he was the Cincinnati offensive coordinator, almost won the MVP with Andy Dalton. He was seen as a quarterback guru, a quarterback fixer, the thing that this organization needs, right? And the Browns were so ecstatic, and Browns fans were so ecstatic when we stopped him from going on that plane to New York, and we were able to hire away Hugh Jackson. Like, the franchise was so happy because they invested in that name. People had told you Hugh Jackson was a quarterback guru. They hired the quarterback guru, and we ended up drafting Deshaun Kaiser and Cody Kessler. He got fired halfway through Baker, right? And he was one of the driving forces behind going with Baker over some of the other names in the 2018 draft class. So the quarterback guru thing didn't really work out for the Cleveland Browns. And that's how the Browns ended up where they were around that time. Name value does very little for this conversation, right? If the Browns would have at the same time hired like Sean McVay or Sean McDermott, a lot of people would have been disappointed, but those would have been better hires, right? If the Browns in 2020 had hired like Kevin O'Connell or something like that, like you see what I mean? The name value of some of the better coaches in the NFL wasn't there before they got the job. So the number one thing I want the Browns to do when it comes to hiring a head coach is avoid the circus, right? It's going to be so easy for this to become a circus. Oh, let's look at Bill Belichick. Let's put some flyers out about Nick Saban. I remember Mark D'Antonio used to pop up. Let's see if we get him out of retirement. All this kind of goofy nonsense that I've seen the Cleveland Browns resort to my entire life. Who could forget the Chip Kelly sweepstakes, right? There's always some kind of big ass fish that the Cleveland Browns are trying to get at coach because they look at coach as a more valuable position than fucking quarterback for whatever reason. And they try to do everything they can to court the right coach because they think that's going to fix the team, right? It's just getting the right coach versus making sound process-based decisions. There are two Cleveland Browns organizations right now. There is the organization I grew up watching my entire life, and then there's the organization that they are clearly aspiring to be. The organization I grew up my entire life does shit like, let's go get Bill Belichick and give him full reign of the fucking team. The organization I grew up my entire life does the gimmicks, loves the gimmicks. We brought in Mike Holmgren. You remember that? Oh, Mike Holmgren is president of the Browns. Brought in Tom Hackert, hired Pat Shermer. You remember that? That was great, right? Yeah. That's what the Browns organization that I'm familiar with my entire life does. The Browns organization that they are trying to be, though, right? This right here, what they're trying to be, what they aspire to be, is a process-based organization. Is an organization that doesn't make decisions based off of hype and name value and Google Trends, right? That they're making decisions that are based on how well does this person fit into the process that the Cleveland Browns already have in place. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to lie to you like most people on the internet and act like I know every detail about every assistant coach in the NFL. I'm going to be real with you, and I might be the only one being real with you on the internet about this. Don't nobody know shit about these assistant coaches. Everybody out here like, oh yeah, you can't hire Robert Saleh. He's not good. You don't fucking know. Like, Clint Kubiak, is he good? I don't know. You know what I mean? We don't have enough information about assistant coaches to be able to make a educated guess on what their usefulness is to their coaching staff. We have no stats to track. We have no transparency when it comes to coaching. We just don't know, right? I'm not going to sit here and act like I know these things when nobody knows these things. What I can say is that you could tell when an organization is following a process versus following gimmicks. So that's step number one before we get to anything. Erase your mind of the notion of these goddamn gimmicks that the Cleveland Browns have trotted out for 20 years and haven't had work out. Every 5 years, it's a new gimmick to run the team. Let's avoid that. So if we go through this coaching cycle and there's not a real tangible possibility of them hiring Bill Belichick, if there's not a real tangible possibility of them not doing something goofy, right? That's good. This should be a process-focused decision. We'll talk about more of what I want to see from the Browns coaching search after this message from my sponsor. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive a 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. So I talk about avoiding making this not a process-oriented decision, right? I can live with a decision that feels like it's process-focused. I can live with a hire that I'm not familiar with if the decision feels process-focused. Now, if we're looking for traits, I would like for a head coach of the Cleveland Browns, or at least the person who's going to be taking over for the Cleveland Browns, I have a couple of things I would like to have. First things first, you are firing Kevin Stefanski for a very specific reason. That means you need to hire a head coach who can solve the problem that you're firing Kevin Stefanski for. Now, because you're firing Kevin Stefanski based on his offensive performance, that will lead a lot of people to assume you need to hire an offensive guy. And I think that is the traditional way to look at this. But all I ask is you be able to solve that problem, right? You can be a defensive coordinator, have a good fix to this. You could be a special teams coordinator, have a good fix to this. But that's the priority. Priority number one. Our offense has been unimaginative. Our run game has been uninspiring. Our player development on the offensive side of the ball has led a little to be desired. How is the guy who takes this job going to fix that problem? Because those are the problems that got Kevin fired, if he gets fired. And those are the problems you're assuming this guy can fix. Now again, not going to pigeonhole yourself into one specific side of the ball if you don't want to. If you want to hire a defensive coordinator, you think a defensive coordinator can fix this, sure, but you better have an explanation for how they're going to do that. That's the biggest thing, right? What is the long-term fix for this offense? Does this defensive coordinator have enough offensive expertise? Because that's something we don't talk about, right? Just because somebody's an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator doesn't mean they're clueless about the other side of the ball. Maybe they have enough expertise to provide a solid hand to an offensive coordinator to be able to play off of that can create consistently strong offenses. That's been done before. So not necessarily saying it has to be an offensive mind, but you do have to figure out how you're going to revamp this offense, because that's not a priority. That's the priority of this hire. If you hire a new coach and you end up with a shitty offense and a great defense, you made no ground. It was pointless what you did, right? So if you're going to hire somebody to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, they got to have an answer for that. However you want to go about it, it's however you want to go about it, but the answer has to be there, and it has to work, and it has to be a long-term solution. It can't be something that can exist for a year or two. You have a little success, somebody gets hired away, the whole thing is gone. So yeah, it can be a defensive coordinator, but they got to be involved in the offensive process, and they have to have proof, or at least you would like them to have proof, that they are a positive factor in inputting into the offense. Right? Like Dan Campbell is a great example of this. Not really the guy you think of as an offensive genius, but his input is helpful for the offense. Right? Been plenty of defensive coordinators like this that have gotten head coaching jobs that are helpful. If you hire somebody who's a defensive coordinator only and they're only worried about their magical defense and they have no input for the offense, that guy's not going to be fucking helpful. You know, like that's why I kind of scoff at the idea of like Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz is a defensive mind only. He is only helpful for the defense. And if you make him head coach, he's only going to focus on the defense, which is going to leave your offense entirely reliant on who's being the offensive coordinator. Like, at least with Bill Belichick, he has a history of looking over the offense. The problem is, it's not like a great history recently with Bill Belichick, but we cross that bridge when we come there. That's what I'm saying, right? It can't be a defensive only guy, right? If you're going to hire Robert Saleh, he has to be somebody you trust to have input on over the offense, because if you don't trust him to have some level of input, some level of consistency to that offense, then what the fuck is he here for? The Browns defense can be good by themselves. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you. Browns defense don't need a great defensive mind to be good at defense. They got Myles Garrett. They're gonna be good. We don't need a genius to figure out the Browns defense. So what would you hire a genius for on defense? You need to hire somebody who maybe they're a genius on defense, but they have something for offense. That's what you need. Whether it be a talent for eye for talent, like Mike Vrabel has a really good eye for offensive coordinator talent and offensive talent in general. And Mike Vrabel was really helpful in fixing that offense there. Of course, Drake May was the most helpful, but Mike Vrabel had some help there, right? You know, again, there are defensive guys who can help with that aspect of it. I don't want to rule out an entire phase of the ball, but you got to figure out if that guy can help you there. If there's no help there on the offensive side of the ball from the defensive guy that you hire, you're wasting your fucking time. You're going to be firing that guy in 2 years. And also, don't just hire somebody because they're an offensive coordinator and they did a good job for a year. You know, again, a process-based decision. You think that this guy's personality is going to work well with this team going forward. You think that this guy has the fundamentals to not only be good now, but to get better as they continue to have the job. If it's an unknown name, I'm fine with it. If it's a defensive name, I can be made to be fine with it. But you just have to solve this one big problem. How are you going to fix the offense? How are you going to make the run game more creative? How are you going to make the passing game more innovative? How are we going to keep up with the rest of the league? How are we going to get to where we need to get to offensively? How are we going to have a better eye for developing talent? Whoever you bring in has to have a good answer for those questions. And that is how I will judge the Browns head coaching hire, by the way, right? When they hire somebody, I'm going to judge them by the answers they give about those things, from the people they hire to the press conferences that they have. That's what I'm going to use to judge the decision, because that is why we would be hiring a head coach in the first place. You can let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Who do you think fits these traits? What names do you like? Are you a fan of one of the gimmicks? Let me know in the comment section down below. But these are my preferences. Let me know your preferences for head coach. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.